Hey, what's up, Scallywags? I told John P. I would. He asked me to do this video. I told him I haven't had any UFO experiences, but I have had a few supernatural ones uh, in my life. And he said, do a video about them. And I told him I would, so I'm going to do that video because a man's only as good as his word, right? If your word ain't shit, neither are you. But the first one I ever had, I don't know, it could have just been a dream. Um, my mother's mother, my maternal grandmother, she died when I was about 6 years old. Uh, she had heart problems. They put a pacemaker in, and that's when they were first doing stuff like that. And she had a heart attack not long after. But when mom and dad divorced, for a while, I was with her. My brother Kenny was with my dad's mom. Not real long, but they always tried to keep me and Kenny together. At least we'd have the stability of each other, you know. But me and Grandma, my mother's mother, were very close. I can remember her cooking lobster, and we were just, and the one thing, there's two things I remember about her vividly. She had a white dress with red polka dots. And the perfume she wore, I know it was a Estee Lauder fragrance. I couldn't tell you the name of the fragrance, but if I only smell it on old women anymore. But if there's, even within the last 3 years, there was a lady, I went right to her. I mean, my nose just took me straight to that old lady. I said, "You're wearing Estee Lauder, aren't you?" And she says, "I am. How do you know that?" And I said, "Well, my grandmother wore that exact same fragrance. I could just, there's certain smells from my childhood, like honeysuckle, cedar burning in a fire, the smell of cedar wood. There's certain memories that bring back, there's certain scents that bring back happy memories for me. And that smell of Estee Lauder, I feel very safe and happy whenever I smell it. You know, honeysuckle reminds me of my childhood, but me and her got very close, and she died. I was very young. And when I was like 16 and really starting to spin out of control, things were really bad at that time. Uh, I had a dream one night, and in my dream, I was a little boy. I was laying on her living room floor, and I'm pushing these Matchbox cars down the track, and I could smell that perfume in the dream. And I looked up, and she was standing there right in the kitchen, and there was a sliding glass door that went out onto the deck, because we used to sit there and look up at the moon when there was a full moon. And she'd always say to me, "You see the man in the moon, Mark?" But I seen her, and I said, "Grandma," and she went out the door, and I was just a little guy in my dream. I got up and I ran towards that door, and I opened up the door, and she was standing at the steps at the end of the deck, And she looked at me and she said, slow down. You're moving real fast. You need to slow down. And she turned around and walked off, went down the steps. By the time I got to the edge of the porch, she was gone. I couldn't see her. And I walked back in the kitchen, and my grandfather was sitting there with his new wife, and I was older at my normal age, 16 and a half. And that dream always stuck with me. I like to think she was trying to tell me, hey, you need to slow down, letting me know she was still looking out for me, but I never forgot about that dream. It was probably just a dream but whenever my mom pulled us out of my dad's house, hold on a sec, I'll be right back. Yeah, whenever mom pulled us out of my dad's house, we lived. We moved over to Illinois with my mom and stepdad, and we lived on the corner of 85th and Main. And this house, you would go down in the basement, and straight to the back on the left-hand corner, there was the coal chute room where they would put coal in for the furnace. And then somebody had built before we moved in there with like 4-inch wide one bys. They put up closets, and then over, if you went down the steps like this and went right, you had the brick wall, and then you had a bathroom there, and then closets wrapped around. And then on the left-hand side, there was closets, and then the coal chute room. I had this dream. Every time I would go down in that basement, the hair would stand up on my arms. It's just like I could feel something in that basement that was malevolent. It was bad. Uh, I wasn't the kind of kid that would get scared in the dark and stuff, but I would go in that basement and, all right, so I ran out of room again on my phone. So here I am. Just woke up from the third time I had this dream. And I mean, I'm covered, just soaked with sweat. And I wanted to get out of the house because all I could think about was that basement, whatever was in that bathroom. Well, I'm sitting outside, the sun's coming up, and Ruth came out to feed her birds. And I guess I didn't look good at all because she said, are you okay? And I said, I keep having bad dreams. It's the same dream, though. And she come over and she said, what did you dream? And I said, it's just a scary dream. And she said, well, what was it? And I told her, and whenever I told her, her face just went pale. And she said, Annie. And she was calling for Annie. Annie come out, and she goes, tell Annie what she told me, what she dreamt. And I told her, and Annie, she was street people. She cussed, but I can't remember what she said. It was weird the way she cussed. And I go, what? And she said that the woman that owned that house before my mom and stepdad bought it hung herself in that basement down there. And about the time I started having them dreams was when my stepdad he cut through the wall and put some steps going up in the attic, and he was making a bedroom upstairs in the attic. And he wasn't a tradesman. He was a salesman, but he was damn handy with his hands. He did a good job on that upstairs, but I don't know if it was changing the house around that started those dreams. But ever since we moved in that house, I just was terrified of that damn basement. And I didn't know why. And then I had that dream 3 nights in a week. And when Annie and Ruth told me that that woman had hung herself in that bathroom down there where I was seeing somebody hanging in there, the shadow on the wall, I did not want to be in that house at all. I mean, not at all. And I was running away all the time, anyways. But when we moved in, I was scared of that basement. And I don't get like scared of the dark and stuff. I never did as a kid. But after that, I was terrified of that basement. And call me crazy, but I really think I'm sensitive to a lot of that stuff. Um, I wish Amy was up to tell you about my son in Arizona. That was unexplainable. I was getting really worked up. I mean, real worked up. I couldn't find a tool I was looking for, and it seemed like, I'd work all damn day. I'd come home, duct tape cars together, always something to fix around the house. And I was getting just really, really frustrated. And here comes my son, Josh. He was in playing with these toys in his room, and here he comes with a crescent wrench. And he says, "Daddy, the soldier man said to give you this." I'm like, "Soldier man?" I said, "What are you talking about, soldier man?" He said, "The soldier man." And then he pointed. My brother Kenny had killed a deer, and he got the skin and the fur tanned out, the hide tanned out by a professional. Well, my grandfather painted the Sioux War Bonnet Society symbol on that deer skin, and it was hanging on the wall. And he said, "The soldier man said to give you this." And I said, "What soldier man?" And he said, "The one that painted that." And he pointed at that deer skin. Number one, at that time, he did not know my grandfather was in the military. He fought in Papua New Guinea. He fought in the Philippines against the Japanese. He got a Silver Star, a Bronze Star, and a Purple Heart. My son did not know my grandfather was in the war. He didn't know that he painted that Sioux War Bonnet Society on that deer skin. There's no way he could have known those two things. And he used to say there was a little girl in the back, and he would describe her as, the way he was describing her, it's like he was describing an Apache or an Indian girl. He said she wore a long dress though, and she said she had dark skin. But for him to bring me the exact tool I needed, say the soldier man said to give it to me, and then when I asked him what soldier man, he pointed at that buckskin on the wall, I was freaking out because my grandfather was a carpenter. And it would be just like him if his spirit was there to see me getting angry. I'm sure he's been there before too, looking for a tool he can't find. And my son Josh was sensitive to stuff like that when he was young. I think a lot of children are when they come into this world, and they forget. But like, if you ever see a child laying in a crib, smiling and reaching out for something that's not there. And then there's another one, but I don't know if I want to get into that one. It wasn't that big of a deal, but I definitely saw a ghost that night. this gal, I was at a party one night, this Sarah gal. This is back, God, probably 1989. I was at a party one night and she come up to me and she goes, "You know Johnny so and so?" I said, "Yeah, I know him." She goes, "Will you beat him up for me?" Well, it was one of my best friends. She's asking me to beat up. She doesn't know that we're friends, I guess. But I said, "Well, what do I get?" And she said, "What do you want?" Well, I was a young man. I wasn't married. I wasn't attached. So you can guess what I wanted. All night we was up there bumping and grinding. It was on Virginia Avenue in Belleville, Illinois. In the duplex there, we're upstairs at Mike and Kathy's house. I wake up, sat straight up in the middle of the night, and there was a woman standing in the doorway, and I swear, right hand to God, this woman looked like she was dressed to be an actor on Little House on the Prairie. She had a bonnet, a shawl, but I didn't feel any fear. Quite the contrary, I felt very peaceful. And I laid back down and I went to sleep. Woke up the next morning and I'm putting my pants on and Sarah goes, "When you gonna beat Johnny up?" I said, "I'm not, but thanks for last night." She got all pissed off at me. I was a dog. But I went downstairs and Mike and Kathy were drinking coffee and I said, "Kathy, why'd you come upstairs last night?" She said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Why'd you come upstairs last night and why were you dressed like that? Like you were gonna be an actor on Little House on the Prairie." And Mike goes, "You saw her too, huh?" And I said, "Saw what?" And he described perfectly what she looked like. He said he had seen her too. He said there was ghosts in that house. And then another one, the most recent one I had a bilateral pulmonary embolism. I went in to take a piss and I could not breathe. I mean, I could not catch air. No matter how deep I breathed in, it's like I was getting no air. My leg had been swollen real bad. I had pain on the inner thigh and my leg was weeping. I had fluid coming out my leg and I knew what was going on. I had a blood clot right there in the main vein that goes down feeds all the blood to the leg. Well, that blood clot traveled and it ended up blocking both lungs. I had a bilateral pulmonary embolism. I didn't even think I could make it. Amy was sitting on the couch. I walked in and I knelt down in front of her and looked her in the eyes. We can communicate without even talking. I just wanted to look her in the eyes and tell her I loved her again. I figured this is it. I'm going to die. I didn't even think I could make it to the living room. She took one look at me and just immediately 911 and ambulance came, took me down to the hospital, and I was in that emergency room maybe 5 minutes. And I thought, oh shit, if they are moving this fast with an old convict like me, something's very, very wrong. My wife is my power of attorney too, so she had signed papers. They wheel me into emergency surgery. As soon as they get me in there, this doctor says, "We have about an hour." They had full oxygen going on me. They said, if we don't get this blood clot out, he's going to go into cardiac arrest. His heart is working extremely hard trying to keep him alive. So they ran this thing up my inner thigh into my lungs, trying to suck this blood clot out. And I'm laying there thinking, an hour. Every time I could feel it moving up in my lungs, and every time she said, "You get any?" And I kept hearing him say, "No." No. Well, now I got the Jeopardy theme going in my head. That do, 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 like on Final Jeopardy. And it seemed like a long, long time. And all I'm laying there and all I'm thinking about is how much I'm going to miss my wife. And finally, he says, I'm going to try one more time and then we're going to have to quit. And I'm thinking, whoa, 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 time out from the fucking game. And I'm asking, did they get any of it? And it's hard for them to understand me because I got the mask on. I went to take the mask off because, if they didn't get it, I was like, what the fuck do you mean you're quitting? Well, the nurse said, she finally understood me. And she said, we got 20% of it. We think that's enough that you're going to live. And I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. During that 3 weeks, I crashed out 2 times where they had to stabilize me. And the one time I crashed out, Amy come up to visit me, and this nurse came in, and she introduced herself, said she was going to be my nurse that day, and she shook my hand, and I said, damn, and she said, what? I said, you are strong. She had a hell of a handshake on her. She said, she goes, well, I power lift. And I said, well, that would explain it. I said, you are strong as hell. I could feel the strength in your hand. And as soon as I said that, I started crashing. She's freaking out. All these other nurses are freaking out. And they are working on me, trying to stabilize me. And I swear, I was in between worlds twice that visit to the hospital for that 3 weeks. But there was a man standing there, had terrible burns on his face. And there was another man, had like a gauze bandage going over his eye and around his head. And you could see blood where his eye was through the gauze bandage. And I didn't feel any evil or good coming off of them. It was just, they were just looking at me like they were very concerned. And I don't know if I was the only person that could see them. Because I remember asking Amy, and can you see these people here? And she couldn't see them. And then the other time, I don't know, it was weird. I went to just this dark place, but it was very peaceful. So peaceful, I almost didn't want to come back. And I could hear people talking. It's like I was in between twice. But I think what pulled me back, that's when I ended up getting that doctor I had was a real asshole. I kept telling him, my lower left lung is hurting bad. Oh no, he says, it's his chest. It's his chest. And I told him, I said, I am 57 years old. I've been shot, I've been stabbed, I've been beat. I know what pain is, and I know what part of my body it's coming from. It's my lower left damn lung. Well, he wouldn't listen to me. And I was in excruciating pain. Well, when I crashed out and the nurses were trying to stabilize me, this gal come wheeling this blood pressure machine in. I'm seeing these 2 guys that nobody else can see. And she goes, I'm here to take his blood pressure. And that real strong nurse, she goes, sweetheart, he's crashing. We're trying to stabilize him right now. Well, this gal gets all pissed off. She goes, fine, you do it then. And she pushed the blood pressure thing out into the hallway. And I sat up in that bed. I said, you fucking little bitch. I said, you think you're having a bad day, bitch? And I was pissed. I mean, I was yelling at her. And I think that's what pulled me out of whatever was going on. I got mad at her because of her fucking attitude, man. I mean, I snapped on her big time. And then I'm sitting there looking at, after they stabilized me, the doctor comes up, and you got to keep in mind what he did before. I had an IV in my arm, and it started getting red and having pus and shit running down it. And I had him look at my arm, and he says, "Oh, you had that's from whenever you came in from your leg." Because they did a test on it, it came back I had staph infection. And he was trying to tell me that it's from my leg. I said, "Look, dude, I ain't a doctor, but I ain't fucking stupid neither. It's all red around that needle, and there's pus. You know? I'm not a doctor, but I'm not fucking ignorant neither." Well, they did a culture from the leg and from there, and it turns out it was from him, the IV. So the son of a bitch lied to me is what he did. And I don't know about you, but I can't have a doctor that I can't trust. But I was already getting pissed at him because I'm telling him I'm hurting in my lower left lung. So what ended up happening is they finally get me stable after I snapped on that one gal. My blood pressure evened out, my heart rate, everything. And people standing there looking at me that nobody else could see weren't there no more. And here comes this doctor, late to the party, and he says, he takes my blood pressure, and he looks at that nurse that was so kind to me, that was so worried about me, trying to stabilize me, and was strong as hell. Probably could have kicked my ass, definitely at that point. But he looked at her and he said, "You brought me up here for this shit?" After that, every time he would walk in the room, I would flip him off and not just stare him. I would just look him dead in the eyes and have my middle finger up. And he'd try to talk it to me, and I'd just stare at him and flip him off. And the nurse come in, and she said, "Why won't you talk to your doctor?" I said, "What the fuck's the sense in talking to him when the son of a bitch don't listen to nothing I'm saying?" I said, "And I don't like his fucking attitude. He thinks his shit don't stink. He treats the nurses like shit." I didn't like him. And I didn't trust him because he lied to me. So they got me another doctor. First time he come in, I was nice to him. And I said, he said, "I heard you're having pain." I said, "Yeah, I am. I was telling the other doctor it's my lower left lung." And he kept saying it was my chest. And he had a portable ultrasound on him. And he did an ultrasound on my lower left lung. And he said, "I guess you are in pain." He said, "Your lower left lung has fluids in it, and you have pleurisy real bad." And they put me on some pain meds. They sent me home with some, but I quit taking them because I was still hurting when I quit taking them, because I didn't want to get strung back out on them again. And, but there were two people standing there. I don't know if they died in that hospital. I don't know if they were demons. I don't know what they were. I didn't feel no fear off of them or nothing. They were just looking at me very concerned. And I was the only one that could see them, but I saw them just like I see anybody else. And then at one time going, it's like I could hear people, but I wasn't in the hospital. It's like I was somewhere else, just like in a layover waiting, real peaceful place though. But those are, and then the other thing that I can only write it off as a miracle. My homie Bobby was there that night. We went out, there's a place by Collinsville, Illinois. You can look it up on the internet. It's called the Gates of Hell. And it's a place where you take the girls, get them scared, and hope you get laid. Well, me, Bobby's girlfriend, this gal that was with Bobby, we went out there to the gates of hell. And we were by the one train track trestle over the road, and I'm up doing my thing with this gal up on the train tracks on the, up top. Well, I hear Bobby arguing, and I hear other voices yelling. So I jump up, I pull my pants up, I go running down the hill. As soon as I come running down the hill and through the woods right there, the little patch of woods, they jump in this 1969 Camaro. And this is one of those cars just blub, 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 blub. I mean, this son of a bitch was hot. And he lights them up and takes off. It's about a quarter mile before you turn. There's a bunch of train trestles you go through on the gates of hell. Each one's one of the gates. But he flies down about a quarter mile, turns the car around, and he's just brake torquing the tires. Smoke's rolling up off this fucking Camaro. And I said, come on, you son of a bitch. And he let off the brake and caught rubber. I listened to that engine all the way to me. And that son of a bitch did not let off the gas. He had it floored. Just, whoa. I mean, you could hear the car shifting. He's got it floored, barreling at me. And Bobby's saying, get out of the road. I say, he's going to swerve. Get out of the road. He's going to swerve. I was flat-footed when that car hit me. When it hit me, the whole world started spinning. I go flying up in the air. The car goes underneath me, and I landed flat on my back in the middle of the asphalt there in the street. And next thing I know, Bobby's looking over me, looking down at me. He's like, dude, are you okay? And I jumped up and I go, fuck no, I ain't okay. I just got hit by a car. He goes, dude. And we jumped in the work van. We had a three-quarter ton work van, totally weighted down, flying down these back roads trying to catch these guys. We couldn't have caught them if we were on a straightaway. That car was hot. Probably had a 1/4-inch race cam, something in it. It was hot as hell. Just blub, 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 blub. But, so, we finally realized we ain't gonna catch these dudes. We stop, and I said, where's the flashlight, man? Bobby got the flashlight. I dropped my pants. Fucking, I'm looking everywhere. Not that day, not the next day, not the day after. Not a scratch, not a bruise, not a mark on my body. And my buddy Bobby is not religious at all. And he goes, dude, that's a miracle. I mean, I was flat-footed, 1/4 mile. I don't know exactly how fast he was going. I guarantee you he got up to 45, 50 miles per hour. Solid. At least. And my feet were planted flat. In my mind, he's going to swerve. And I just got this feeling that in the car, the other people were saying, swerve, and he was saying, he's going to move. Neither one of us flinched. And he hit me dead on. It should have shattered my legs. I could have went underneath the car. I didn't. The whole world started spinning. Bobby said I went about 15 foot up in the air. I landed flat on my back. Not one bruise, not one scratch, not one mark on my body. And I don't got no explanation for that. You get hit, a car moving that fast, you're standing flat-footed. And those old Camaros, man, it hit me about the knees. It should have fucked me up bad, and it didn't. And it's one of those, there's been a few times in my life where all I can say is, but by the grace of God. Because there's no logical explanation why I didn't even have a scratch. I mean, it's almost like an angel took the hit for me. I don't know. But even my buddy Bobby said, dude, that was a miracle. We got into it with them boys out there in Ville Hills. They're pretty serious dudes. And Bobby said, they don't play out there, man. They'll use a car as a weapon. I said, you would too. You know, I mean, I'd have done the same thing if I was them. But I thought for sure he's going to swerve, man. He didn't, though. But that, to me, is supernatural. I'm not some Iron Man or something. I'm just a man. And there's no logical explanation to why I got hit that hard, flew that high in the air, and did not get hurt at all. I was up roofing the next day, not sore, nothing. And the only explanation I have for that is God's protection or an angel, something. It should have messed me up real bad. And when he hit me, I'm sure he was freaking out, sweating for a few days, thinking, oh, shit. It probably killed him, you know. Why ain't it on the news? But yeah, like I said, Bobby is not religious. And even Bobby said, dude, that's a miracle. If there's miracles, that was one. And whenever I jumped up, I said, fuck, no, ain't okay. He goes, dude, he was all freaking out. It's like, no, I ain't okay. I just got hit by a fucking car. 1 minute you're having sex up on the train tracks, and then you hear your brother argue. It ain't easy being brothers sometimes. But those were my supernatural stories, John P. And I told you I would do them. So I gotta keep my word. A man's only as good as his word. But all those stories are the God's honest truth. And I'm still, I don't know, I got this tumor in my pineal gland. And I started getting this empathy shit going on where if somebody's near me, I'm not saying I can relate to their feelings. I feel their feelings, and it drains me. It really does. It drains me. It's like you're a battery, and it sucks all the energy out of you, feeling what everybody feels all the time. And I thought I was losing my mind. There was a lot of shit happening. The worst, and it's the saddest I've ever felt in my life. I took my Uncle Bobby up to the eye doctor because he's legally blind. And we're sitting there, and this old man comes in, probably in his 80s. And he had a gal in her 50s in a wheelchair, and she was one of God's children. She had a mental handicap. Those people don't bother me. And I just felt, I was so sad. I went down to the bathroom, and I'm bawling my eyes out in the bathroom. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I'm taking water out of the sink, splashing my face. Finally, I pull myself together, walk back in that visiting room. I sit down by my Uncle Bobby. He goes, are you okay? I said, I don't know. And the receptionist calls that old man up. And this is still, to this day, it's hard to even talk about it. It's the saddest I ever felt in my life. This old man goes, she goes, sir, you don't have an appointment today. And he said, her whole life, me and her mother have taken care of her. My wife died 2 years ago, and I can't do this no more by myself. He was there to find a place where he could put his daughter, and this old man's heart was, I've never felt that kind of sadness in my life. That old man's heart was breaking. And I'm convinced I was feeling, not relating to, feeling his pain. Like I was going through it myself. And a lot of things like that were happening. And I thought that tumor in the pineal gland, maybe it's making me go nuts. I thought I was going crazy. So my neurologist, my brain specialist, I went in to see him and I said, man, I think this thing in my head's fucking making me crazy or something. And he said, what's going on? And I gave him that example and a few others. And he said, you might be an empath. And I said, that's mumble jumble bullshit. He goes, no, it's not. He said, it's a real thing. He said, but it's very rare for a man to be an empath. And for a long time, I was telling Amy, God is doing this to me. He's making me feel everybody's pain and stress and anxiety and frustration because of all the hurt I've caused in my life. And as time went on, I look at it kind of like a blessing, because the people you love, like Nate, I said, dude, are you all right? Oh, yeah, I'm fine. No, you're not. What's going on, man? I mean, I'm a human lie detector. And then my Uncle Danny, the last Christmas I had with my dad's side of the family, we were driving home. I told Amy, I said, Amy, I was talking to Justin, you know, my Uncle Danny's son, and I was feeling, coming off of him, what I feel like when I'm in that dark place and I'm thinking bad thoughts about maybe checking out early. And I wanted to call my Uncle Danny, because I told Amy, I said, I think he's thinking about killing himself. I was feeling real hopeless depression coming off of him. And I wanted to call my Uncle Danny, and I thought, he's going to think I'm nuts. And what if he's not thinking, you know, those thoughts? And then that day, next day went by, and then the day after, I couldn't take it no more. I thought, I got to call him and let him know just in case it's real. So I called up my uncle and I told him, I said, you're going to think I'm nuts. But this is what I was feeling when I was talking to Justin the other night. And he goes, oh my God. And I said, what? He goes, that night when we were packing up to leave from the party, he said, he come up to me and his mother and said, can I stay with you guys tonight? I'm thinking about taking my life. He's thinking about killing himself. And I mean, there's just so many situations like that. When I was out in Arizona, I went out to see my daughter, and we went out to smoke. We were at this big sports bar, and we finished our cigarettes. She goes, let's go inside. I was feeling, this guy pulled up in a real nice Dodge Dually, probably $80,000 truck. And he's talking to these two gals, and I'm feeling fear coming off of this one woman, big time. And my daughter goes, let's go inside. We're done with our cigarettes. I said, no, something ain't right. And I walked over, and I said to the one lady, I said, ma'am, are you okay? And she goes, no, I'm not, and thank you for asking. I said, what's going on? And she looked at that guy. I said, I think you need to leave. And he said, I don't have to. I said, I would suggest you leave. And he got in his truck and he left, and she goes, thank you so much. She goes, we don't even know him. And he come up and he was talking to us, and she said, I was just feeling weird things coming off of him. He was wanting a cigarette, and I said, he's driving an $80,000 truck and can't afford a cigarette, you know, but I could feel the fear coming off of them. And then later on that night, this guy walked in. And you know how, like, Down syndrome, you can look at the face and tell? This guy looked normal. And I couldn't figure it out because he looked like a grown man. But I was feeling like a child coming off of him. And I said to Amy, I said, Dad is weird. She said, what? I said, that dark-haired guy over there? She goes, yeah, what about him? I said, he's like a child. I'm feeling like a child coming off of that guy. And we got to talking to him later on, shooting pool, and he was like a child. He had some mental things going on, but you couldn't tell by looking at him. And we had a good time shooting pool with him that night. And then on the way home, my daughter goes, Dad, I believe you. And I go, what do you mean? She goes, just a few things I saw tonight. I believe you really can feel what's coming off of people. That's why a lot of times I don't like going out. Around here, when I go out, I feel frustration, anger, stress, anxiety. It feels like a prison yard that's getting ready to explode and people are going to start getting stabbed up, is what it feels like. It's just like a bomb that's going to blow up. And I have found ways to recharge. Like if I go out into the woods, I got a spot in every state that's my spot. But if I lean up against a tree, just me out there, and I close my eyes and I listen to the wind and the leaves, I listen to the animals and nature, smell the fresh air, it like recharges me like a battery. And that's the only way I can describe it. It's like when I'm around people, their emotions, it's like it drains my spiritual energy. And I know that probably don't make no sense to nobody, but it's a real thing. If Nate was here or if Amy was awake, they would both tell you it's a real thing. I've had people that didn't believe me and doubted me. Well, what am I feeling like? And I'd tell them. Now, I've heard some people say they can do it over phones and this and that. I can't. But if I'm around a group of people, I can pick up on things and I feel things. And that old man in that eye doctor waiting room, all the stuff I've been through in my life, I've never felt that kind of heartache in my life. It's the saddest I ever felt. And I know I was feeling what that old man was feeling. That's what he said. He said, me and her mother took care of her whole life. My wife died a couple years ago, and I can't do this anymore. I can't do it by myself. And that old man's heart was just breaking. He was feeling like he was letting his wife down who had passed. He was feeling like he was letting his daughter down. And he had an immense amount of love for both of them. I've never felt that much sorrow in my life, where I'm literally went down to the bathroom and I'm sobbing in there, not crying, sobbing. And I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah, I was sweating for a while there thinking, you're losing your mind, Mark. Because I never bought into that stuff. And then I got to looking up the pineal gland. They said I was probably born with it, and it's growing, but it's not growing very fast. So I looked up the pineal gland, and that led me down this road of the chakras, and they associate the pineal gland with the third eye, the third eye, and this and that, and about a month or two before I was diagnosed with that tumor in the brain is when all this empathy stuff started. I mean, I had compassion once I accepted God into my life, but I'm talking, this ain't compassion. This is, you're literally feeling. You take on the other person's emotions. You're feeling what they're feeling. And it's very draining, very draining. And I used to think it was just mumbo jumbo, all this bullshit. And then that one with the chakras and all that, was talking about that being the third eye, and I don't know. I don't know if that tumor's starting to grow. We don't know what the brain does. And I don't know if that tumor had opened something up in me, but I am a human lie detector. And me and Amy, one time, we were in this store. It was down at Menard's hardware store. And we're walking, and this guy is walking towards us, and he walked by me, and I stopped dead in my tracks. I got goosebumps, arms, hair standing up. I turned around, and I'm just looking at him. And it took Amy a minute to snap me out of it. She goes, what's going on? This dude What I was feeling coming off of him, he was a masochist. He enjoyed hurting children. That's just what I felt when he went by. He got pleasure from hurting children. And I told Amy, I said, I need to go out and take this dude out in the parking lot. And she goes, Mark, you don't know that that stuff's real. What if he's innocent and he's not really somebody like that? And I thought, you know what, you're right. I'm not God. I don't know that that's for real, for sure. That's what I felt when he went by me. And it gave me chills and goosebumps. And what I wish I would have done, I wish I would have went out and just followed him and found out where he lived and kept an eye on him for a minute. Because when he walked by, I'm talking, I got cold. And just the hair on my arm stood up and I got goosebumps. And what I felt coming off of that dude was truly evil shit. It's not like I was reading his mind. It was just, that's what gave him pleasure. That's what he enjoyed when I was walking by him. That's what I felt. He enjoyed doing sadistic things to small children. And like Amy said, it doesn't mean it's true. But God, I wish I would have followed that man. I look for him when I go down to that store. I'd recognize him if I ever saw him again. I'd probably feel the same shit coming off of him. But I wish to God, I kick myself for that all the time. I wish I would have followed him and seen what he was up to, if anything. And I'm not talking about empathy, but if your gut tells you something, always trust your gut. Our bodies, our minds, pheromones, hormones, the pheromones and people's body posture and different things subconsciously cue our minds to things. It's something primal in us. And if your gut tells you something, do not take that lightly. There's been a few times in my life that my gut instinct saved my life. It's just always trust your gut, But those are my supernatural things there, John P. So don't say I'm not a man of my word, my brother. And you guys can believe it if you want, but everything I said is the God's honest truth. And I'll take that with me and die with it in my mouth because it's the truth. But I'm going to hop off here now. Much love, much respect. And I wish nothing but all the good stuff for you guys. Each and every one of you, whoever you are, whether you like me or not, whatever country you're from, whatever religion you are, I wish all of you many blessings. God bless.